Well, it is the beginning of July here for the 2022 growing season, and this is the end of the growing season for all the bamboo here. So there's not going to be any new shoots coming up, so whatever is here has pretty much mostly grown out, and there won't be any more new branches or new leaves or anything like that. There is a one or two way in the back there that are still branching out. That's the vivax, but the rest of it is completely done growing. So what you're looking at here is as big as tall as it's ever going to get for the season anyways. Some of the shoots there are about between 20 and 25 feet, or a lot of them are actually. And this is about the average maximum height it's ever going to get here in northeastern Ohio. So there might be some shoots possibly in the future that might come up, maybe hit close to 30 feet, but that will be the rarity. So right now you can see this grove is actually growing outwards quite a bit. It's getting thicker and expanding more towards the back now. And going forward, I'm actually not even sure if I'm going to have to really do much updates. And this year there's not really a whole lot to say other than you can see what it looks like now. But in this video here, I'm going to travel back in the past and kind of just go through a few things, maybe educational stuff about bamboo, and then kind of the progress since the past winter. Well, it is the end of January 2022, and we got about a foot of snow on the ground, maybe close to 18 inches in some spots, and you can see here the bamboo is still green. We've had some pretty cold temperatures this month. It's been going down to below 10 degrees Fahrenheit a couple times, around 5, and then actually just last night it was down to 0 and -1 in some places. But it's still green right now. Some of the moso in there, it could possibly turn brown. I won't really notice that until later on. It could be a week, 2 weeks before that even shows up if it did kill it. All right, it is February 3rd, 2022, and we're in the middle of another snowstorm. It wasn't that long ago that we had our last one, and I want to talk about a couple things with this bamboo here. Man, this snow is already getting deep. We're going to get another foot tonight. Can you believe it? So there's a couple things I wanted to mention here with the bamboo. You can see how it's all matted over right now. It's because we had some rain that was freezing over last night, and it made it kind of heavy. Now, it's not weighed down from the snow. It's really just kind of covered in a lot of ice. You can see here that the fence is underneath it, and that was kind of my intention when I put the fence up, so that the fence is sitting 2 feet away from the barrier, so the bamboo will then lean over and then kind of rest on the fence. And that way it kind of alleviates any problem that might occur with breaking. And that's the other thing I wanted to talk about here is the snow load. You can see here when it's matted over like this, or when it's fallen over like this, it creates a nice surface for the snow just to collect on. And that can become a problem. If it starts to build up on top of this, it can start to crush it. Although it is pretty strong, it can potentially break it. Now, every now and then I have to come out here. If we do get storms like this, afterwards I might tap it off with a shovel to let it fall down inside of it so it can stand back up. That's mainly just so it doesn't keep building up over the winter, because if I didn't do that, it could get more and more and more, and then potentially start to break it. And also, when this leans over like this, the deer, you actually see the tracks right there. This is their regular spot to come here and start to eat this stuff. They start tearing it all apart, especially now during the winter when there's not much food for them. They sit there and they just munch on this all day, and they keep coming back to it. So I do that to kind of lift it up so they can stop doing that, and to kind of deter them away from doing that. However, one thing I wanted to mention here, this is kind of the most important factor, I guess, is that even though this could potentially build up on top of this and become a problem with it if it weighs it down, that's going to kind of help me in this situation. This will actually help it because it's going to get cold after this. After tonight, we're down about 25 degrees Fahrenheit right now. It's going to go down to about 10 or less. And with the snow on top of it and it kind of matted over like this, it doesn't allow a lot of wind to blow through it, and the snow actually helps insulate it and protect it from the air and everything. So in this case, it might actually be helpful to leave it until the weather warms up, and then I'll knock it off then. But I just want to kind of mention that because it could be helpful for anyone else trying to grow bamboo. It's not always a bad thing when it starts to look like this and the snow gets on top of it, especially when it might even get cold. So yeah, if it's standing straight up, like you can see a couple pieces here standing straight up, when the wind blows through a really cold air, if it's moving through there, that's going to dry it out, and that's what kills it. It's not so much really the cold temperatures necessarily, even though bamboo can survive to the, its rating, or what they say it can survive to. So like some of this can survive to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, if it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 weeks, that will eventually kill the top growth. All the leaves will dry out, it'll turn brown, and maybe the stems and the canes will be alive, but all the leaves will be gone. And then even some of the canes will probably die back too. So it's not always about the maximum negative temperature, it's about how long it can sustain being at a certain temperature, which can be above that minimum temperature. But the roots, however, even if all its top growth was to turn completely brown and die, the roots underground are going to survive well below that minimum temperature. So if it can survive negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, if it says it can survive that, well, then the roots are going to survive for even colder temperatures. So it's never really going to die off completely unless you have a bamboo that's more of a tropical variety, which is a clumping bamboo. But all right, I think that's enough for this update. Maybe we'll just come back and give another update maybe in a couple of months here. All right, it's been several years and not a single runner has ever tried to jump the barrier. And I just cut these here. Those are just staked in there to hold some netting I have over here. So it's not actually anything growing up out of the ground, it's just cuttings. But over here, after all these years, the only rhizome that has actually jumped the barrier is right here. Right here. And it's not like these things actually just grow and like just one day they're there and now you can't get them out and everything. This takes a long time. It could be weeks to months before a rhizome completely jumps it and gets into the ground to the point where it's actually going to be a problem. So it only takes once a year to come back here just to check all around the barrier. And if there's anything that grows, all you got to do is cut it. So just cut it like this. I'll cut it up here. Done. Now this part here, basically just pull it out. Now, I'm not going to be able to do this one-handed, but you get the idea. I fertilized my bamboo grove over this winter. I don't normally do this, but I figured I'd give it a little boost this year. This is just a regular lawn fertilizer, mainly nitrogens, 3204. There's probably minerals in there as well, but it's not really so important. So there's this much left in the bag right there, and I use the rest of the bag. This covers 5,000 square feet, so I probably overdid it more than I needed to, but bamboo's, it sucks up a lot of nitrogen anyways. So right now it's the beginning of May. I'm gonna put the rest of this in that patch back there because right now the shoots are probably just starting to break ground or just below the surface of the soil right now. And I wanna make sure that they have some extra boost so when they start to grow, they'll have more nitrogen to maybe grow taller and maybe grow more canes. So I'm gonna go do that. All right, I looked around this entire grove and I didn't see any tips poking up just yet, but it's gonna be very soon. Every single year it pretty much is right on schedule. So this fence here has been working out fairly well. It's got the rope here, the rope tier, then it has a cable tier right here. This is I think it's just a 16th steel cable, stainless steel actually, and then rope and then another stainless steel. It's been doing a good job for keeping the bucks out from, during rutting season, and they use their antlers and destroy the bamboo. They just thrash and rip it all apart. So it's been keeping the bucks out of it. But right now, what's happening a lot is they just kind of, the does especially, they just kind of walk right through the fence. I know it doesn't seem like it'd be easy, but with their body height, they actually just walk right through it, and it's like it's not even there. So I put this mesh, you can probably barely see it. I put this mesh up here, they call it deer netting around here, although it's the worst kind of deer barrier I've ever seen because this is what happened. See this hole? You can't see it really in the video too well, but see this part here? Big hole over here. I just put this up a week ago. I figured that would happen. They get caught in it. If they don't see it, they thrash, they rip it, or they just push right through it. I mean, most of the time it's usually when they get caught in it in some way or another, and then they thrash and rip it apart. That happened the very first time I tried using it around the entire grove, and they tore it to pieces. So it's not deer netting at all, it's just netting. Anyways, so normally the normally the canes or the shoots will start to poke up right over here in this section first. So this is along the front of the grove, and right here, this is where the sun hits it the most. And because that's a black barrier there, it tends to heat up the soil right in the front there, and I'll start to see shoots start to poke up right along here first because it's warmer there. I think the soil temperature, if I remember correctly, for bamboo needs to be around 55 degrees or something like that before it starts to trigger to push up through, because the nodules or the shoots, they're sitting down below the soil right at the root nodes, and they're just waiting. And then as soon as that temperature starts to change and increase to a particular point, that's when they start to actually grow and expand out upwards. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this bag, what's left in it, and just kind of toss it up into the grove there and spread it out. And then I'll probably be back again once they start to shoot, if there's anything to talk about. All right, we're the second week into May, and right on schedule, the Moso bamboo is starting to come up. And the only one I could find so far, there's probably more, they're deeper into the grove there. It's right there. It's a couple feet away from me, so it doesn't look quite as big on video, but that's actually probably close to an inch in diameter coming out right there. So that is absolutely the Moso. It's always comes up the first of all of them to come up, and it's that really dark brown red color, very easy to identify both by timing and by color, and I guess by size. There'll probably be more coming up, but as of right now, it's the only one I saw. I was looking around the rest of the grove, and I didn't see anything else. I just saw that one, but it was 91 degrees today, so it makes sense why that would be poking up through. There's definitely going to be more to follow. One thing I also forgot to mention was mostly the reason why this, I was talking about the fence before. I don't really care so much that if the deer get into the grove inside of there. This is the time of the season I do not want them in there, because as much as bamboo has a bad rap for a lot of reasons, the reason why I really want the fence up and I don't want them in here is because if the deer walk in there and they step on that or kick it or anything like that, do anything to damage it, it aborts and it stops growing. It only comes up in the spring. It only happens once a year. It only comes up for about a month, maybe 2 months at most, and then that's it. It never comes up. No new stuff comes up during the year, except maybe in the late fall you might see a couple of shoots come up, but 95% of the growing season is in the mid to late spring, around here anyways. So if anything was to grow there in the grove and the deer step on all of it, they stop growing, and then nothing really comes up to replace it. That's why if you don't have a barrier and you have grass like me, I don't really need the barrier necessarily. If the grass gets cut in the spring, which it does constantly, any shoots that try to come up, they're all going to get cut. There will never be anything that grows out in the grass anyway, so long as the grass is getting cut around there. And over a long period of time, if you continue to cut the grass, you sort of train the grove to stay in there without a barrier, and it will never want to grow out towards, where it would initially start growing anyways. There's a lot of other groves I've seen with bamboo around other properties around, locally anyways, in the region, and they don't have any barriers whatsoever, and sometimes it's just confined to a small area without a barrier, and it could have been there for a decade, and it just stays there. So around this region where we don't really have like tropical kind of climates, we get cold winters and stuff like that, it really doesn't grow out of control naturally, so it's not really a concern. But the reason why the fences there, going back to that, is just to keep the deer out of there, mainly during this growing season, and then also during the rest of the year, or I should say in the fall, when the deer start to I should say the bucks start to rut, and then they start to tear up the stuff that just keeps them away from the outside edge. Once this grove fills in thicker, and then the bamboo starts coming up along this barrier thicker, there's going to be such a dense wall of bamboo that the deer won't be able to get in there anyways, inside the grove. And if they destroy anything with their antlers, it's not really going to matter. It's going to be minimal. It's not going to break down the barrier on the outside, so they won't be able to get through. Which it will form a natural fence on itself, and I don't got to worry about the deer getting in there at all to ruin anything. There will be no space for them to walk through. Also, around the other side, I also forgot to mention, I mentioned it last season that I planted new type, the last type I was going to add to this grove, which is Bassetti, and that is over on this side. It's over in there, that little patch right there. A lot of the little stuff, because the deer did get in here, even though it's, like I said, they crawl right through the fence, they ate all of it. There's some taller canes. There's a couple taller canes that grew up last year, which they can't really touch, so the leaves are too high for them, but the majority of it that was short in the bottom, they ate all the leaves already over winter. Anything that's short enough that they can reach up to about this high, they will decimate and eat all the leaves off during the winter. And you want those leaves to stay on over winter, because in the spring, that's what collects the energy to feed the root system to send up the new shoots. And if you don't have enough leaves on top, all the energy is going to go into producing more leaves and less energy into new shoots, and which would be, taller and larger. So I don't want them to be touching the bamboo during, most of the year. But the Bassetti, going back to that, I originally said that I planted a patch there, like a 1 gallon pot. I don't want them to touch that initially. It needs to take hold and expand, and if they keep eating away at it, it will not grow. It'll get choked out by the rest of the bamboo going around it, and it won't have any chance of actually growing anymore. It'll stay confined and eventually just kind of die off. So that's another reason why I didn't want the deer in there. But as I said, once this all fills in, I don't really care. This outside fence will just be purely decoration. As of right now, it's actually serving more of a purpose. Also wanted to mention here, kind of going back to talking about why I don't want them to touch the bamboo. Excuse me, I'm sniffling because I have allergies in the springtime. It's all the pollen. I walk over here in this back. I don't think I've ever shown this here, but there's this little patch here. It's about the size of twice the size of a basketball, I'd say, in diameter right here. The base part. I planted that back here like 6-7 years ago, and it has not grown ever since. It has not expanded. It's grown a couple new shoots, but the deer keep eating away at this. They keep eating all the leaves. It'll produce new leaves in the spring here, and it'll send up maybe a few new shoots, but it's not expanding whatsoever. Every year the deer eat this in the fall and the winter. As you can see, there's no leaves left, and then all your energy has to go back into producing more leaves and a couple of shoots, and that's it. So this is not going to be expanding it at all because the deer keep messing with it. So I have a natural barrier called animals. So, all right, that's it for this segment. I'll come back when more shoots start to come up in my grove over there. All right, we're at 24 hours later now, and the Moso shoot that's coming up right there is probably another inch or two taller. There's actually, right down next to it, you won't really be able to see it much on the video, but right to the right of it, there's another thing poking up next to it, another shoot, and that's not the Moso. That's going to be the incense bamboo. There's one over in that area I can see, and then I can show you also, there's one right here, right there. So that's the incense bamboo that's coming up. And I noticed over on that side over there, there's a few more poking up through there. So over the next couple days, I'm gonna start seeing a lot more shoots come up. All right, so here's a quick update. It has now been 5 days exactly, and there is the shoot, and you can see it is grown tall so far. That's about 6.5 feet tall now. So growing pretty quickly, and there's obviously, as you can see, there's a bunch more coming up. There's one there, one there. They're all in there. It's gonna be hard to see on camera here, but they're growing up all over. New ones there. I'm not gonna point out every single one of them, but they're all over the place. Here's another spot here. You can see more of them, probably a little easier. New ones growing up there, there, all over there, and obviously all mixed inside of there as well. And over here, you can see all the new ones. All those, pretty much all those that you're looking at right there are all the new ones coming up, except for a couple of the existing ones you can see here. But all these shoots coming up over here are all new. So they're growing pretty quickly. We've had good weather. It's been warm, probably warmer than normal for this time in May. Or I should just say a little above average anyways. And there's no cold weather on the horizon. The nights have not been cold. There's no frost. Very warm nights, so that's helping a lot. And we did have a little bit of rain here and there, not a soaking rain. So all that is good for bamboo to grow quick. And looks like the forecast also is showing that there's not going to be any colder temperatures in any of the coming nights. So we're not going to have any frost so far that I can tell all the way out till Memorial Day, which is pretty much for around here. That's like the last day that there would be, danger of frost. Frost really shouldn't hurt any of these coming up. The only type that really can be possibly damaged by frost would be the moso, which was the big shoot over on that side. The rest of this type over here that's growing, it really wouldn't be hurt by the frost, but it would slow the growth down. And once these things start growing, start coming out of the ground, they're kind of on a timer. So if the weather was warm and all of a sudden we had a cold spell where it was just really cold and they slowed down, or it was really dry and they didn't get enough to start growing taller, enough water to start growing taller, that would inhibit their maximum size to a certain point. And the reason is because the way the bamboo grows when it comes out of the ground, it's not really growing like a normal plant does, though. These are underground and they're compact, and what I mean is they're kind of like a car antenna. They have they're cylindrical, and there's little tiny cylinders inside of a cylinder and a cylinder inside of a cylinder, and all it's really doing for the most part is just expanding and telescoping out, just like a car antenna would. And that makes it grow quicker. Obviously not the entire thing is not just a bunch of solid material telescoping out of there. There's some other processes going on there with hardening off and everything like that, but that's how they're able to grow so quickly. But if it's not getting what it needs, they start to harden off quicker. And if they're already growing slow, then once they get to a certain point, if it's already been 30 days or 45 days from when they started, they're going to hit a point where they're going to kind of stop growing any taller, and they're not going to achieve their maximum height. It is now the beginning of June, and I wanted to make a quick update here to talk about a couple of things. The one bamboo shoot coming up here, that was the big moso one. It seems like it's topped out around maybe 14 feet or so. So you can see it's starting to branch out now, and that basically means it's not going to get any taller at this point. It's pretty tall, but the other ones, the incense bamboo that's all coming up here, is really pretty much the same height, and those are not even as thick. Some of these here are only, they're only this thick, to where the moso one here is quite a bit thicker, you can see, even thicker down at the base. And I also wanted to point out here that some of the shoots, when they come up, so initially I was showing before all the shoots that were coming up, and then over here, you see down here, these are the second batch of shoots that were coming up after the initial ones, and these here have halted, which means that they're not gonna grow anymore. They're basically gonna wilt and disappear. There was a whole bunch of that stuff growing in here as a second batch coming up, and a lot of those, it's usually what happens is they self-terminate. Most of the second batch that comes up self-terminates, and a couple of them will continue to grow. I really think that what happens with the way the bamboo grows in the springtime is maybe in case one of the newer ones coming up gets damaged, there's one ready to be replaced, ready to replace it. And there's only so much energy to go around, and I think the organism as a whole basically self-prunes. As for the rest of the grove, all the new stuff is looking pretty tall. It's definitely taller than the other stuff that's there. Looks like most of it is probably could be between 15 and 20 feet right now. And some of them will probably still get taller. We're about 2 weeks into June here, and I'm starting to see what I think is the red margin coming up. It's coming up in the area where I originally planted it, and I didn't really see much last year, but it looks like there's more coming up this year. And I also think I see the vivax coming up as well. I'll point them out in the video here. I'm not really sure if it's gonna, if you're gonna be able to see them. Let's see if I can do a little zoom in. Digital zoom. Right over there, you see there's a little stem coming up there, and then there's a smaller one down next to it. It has a sort of a brownish red color to it. It's more on the brown side, but it's not just those. There's more over here. There's one little thing coming up there, and there's a bunch more scattered through here. And then down there, there's another one that's not the same, which is right there. That one is definitely not the red margin. It looks very similar to the Moso, but I know it's not Moso because the Moso has already finished shooting for this season. That's going to be the vivax. The vivax always comes up about a month after everything else, along with the red margin. And that one there has a very similar sheathing on it, the sheathing leaves as I would call them. That is very similar to Moso with the coloration and the kind of speckly look to them. Like almost like black specks on them. It almost looks like mold. That's not what it is, but that's how I know that that's the vivax. And also when you see it come up, you see on the Moso here, you see how closely spaced those culms are? That's another indication of Moso. The vivax bamboo that's large just like the Moso, and I think I can point it out back here for you. Right back in there is a vivax cane. It's right there. They're very long culms. There's a lot of spacing between all the way down to the ground. That's how they are. You know, it could be 8 to 12 inches between each spacing, where these are only, 3 or 4 inches between each one, or somewhere close to that. Here's kind of a closer look at the red margin coming up there. It's right there on the edge of my finger, and there's another shoot coming up behind it. That's not the same thing. But the way that you can tell really is if you kind of look at it, it does have sort of a brownish, very slight red color to it, all the way from the outer sheathing leaves to the tip of the leaves. And when it first comes out of the ground like that, it is a lot more spiky looking. It has a more narrow taper, and the tops of it, it's very, very pointy looking compared to the rest of the kind of bamboo that comes up. And then here's a closer look over here at the vivax coming up. You can kind of see it. It almost looks right there. It almost looks like it's, decaying in a sense. And maybe the outer sheathing leaves sort of are, because they are developing under the soil for a while before they actually come up. But that is the visual difference. Actually, you can see right behind there's another shoot coming up there. That's the red margin as well. Some of them don't come up quite as brown or red. They're maybe slightly green, but for the majority of them, when they come out of the ground, they're not green like the other types. All right, we're the beginning of July now, and the vivax shoot I was pointing out before has grown pretty tall. You can see it up there, all the way up there, just starting to branch out now. So that's not going to get any taller, but that's pretty tall. That's at least 20 feet right there. And I didn't see any more new shoots come up. So right now you see the Moso right there, and then the vivax right next to it right there, which is exactly what I was saying it was earlier in the video. I haven't seen any new shoots of the vivax come up. So far it's just that one. As far as I could tell, what I was talking about before with the red margin, those were not red margin that were coming up. Those were basically dying shoots that the entire system has aborted. They just look like red margin because they were dying. I think the red margin at this point is probably gone, and actually its first winter, or I think maybe the second winter, it showed signs that it wasn't really liking the colder temperatures that we have around here. I'm going to go on the other side of the grove and see if I see any Bassetti coming up, which I don't think there is. So there's the patch of the Bassetti right there that I planted, and I didn't really see any new Bassetti shoots come up. Maybe one, I really don't remember. It might have been that green one right there in the center. That might have been a new one that came up. I'm not even sure. So you can see here this is actually expanded quite a bit towards the back. It's kind of hard to show in video, especially with this fence in the way. That's to keep the deer out, but I can show with my hand here. So about right up to here is where it was in the previous years, and then all this new growth from there to back here is where it's expanded to. It's still kind of thin back in here, but I expect over the next year or two that's going to really thicken up, and then this whole area will be pretty thick. And I won't even need this fence anymore, because then the deer won't really be able to get in there to do anything. I really just try to keep the deer out so that they don't trample the new shoots in the spring and ruin them, because once anything steps on them, even just in the slightest, the shoot stops growing. So I'm saying it's so easy to maintain bamboo so long as you just take care of it while it's shooting in the spring. If you let it go too long, well, then it's harder to take care of. But yeah, I keep the deer out of there for that reason. And in the wintertime, they eat the heck out of it. But now it's so tall, it doesn't matter what they eat down here. Anyways, yeah, so that's about it for the outside stuff. I got one more thing to show you, though. This is the original seedling that started it all. Most of that grove came from this one seedling. So many years ago, I started growing the bamboo in my basement from a single seed that I got from a pack of 100 seeds, and only 5 of those seeds actually took out of that 100, and 1 of them actually continued to grow, the rest of them died. And this was the original seedling. Once this grew its own new shoots, I cut this off and kept it. So most of that grove came from this. The other types I planted later on, but most of it actually came from this as one single plant. And I think that's pretty neat, considering it's really not that many years for the grove to expand that much that quickly. So like I said before, you can find all those videos leading up to this year, because I've done annual updates, in the playlist in the description below. So that's it for this update for this year. Thanks for watching.